Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of UiPath tutorial series of 2025. I hope you are enjoying the journey so far and practicing along with me. In the last session, we explored workflows, sequences, flowcharts, and state machines. And also we learned when to use which one. Today we are diving into fundamental concept in UiPath, which is variable and argument. It is important to know what is variable, what is argument, so that you can make dynamic, efficient, and versatile automations. So let's get started. So what are variables? Think of variables as a container that stores data, just like a box. So if you have a box, you can store any number of items, tools, books or anything. The same way, variable holds data of different types like numbers, text, boolean or any other data type. So variables are important in our automation as well as in any programming language, because this is where we store our values so that we don't hardcode these values in the code itself. I can give you an example. Suppose that you are automating a login process where you would need credentials like username and password. You can create two variables, username and password, to hold username and password in your workflow. And in future, if you want to change the value, you can just update the variable value and your login will work properly. You don't need to change in the workflow itself. You can change in the variable, and also you can use that variable in many places as per your requirement. So now let's go to UiPath Studio and learn how to create a variable, what are the data types, what is a scope, and what is default value. So this is UiPath Studio. We'll create a new process now. So let's name it as part 2 variables and argument. Once I created this project, a main workflow is opened. Now what we will do, we'll take one assign activity. You can type assign in activities pane and drag and drop assign activity. So now you can see assign has two text boxes. One is save to and value to save. So suppose that I want to create a variable. You can right click and you can click on create a variable, or you also have a shortcut key Control K to create a variable. We have another options as well to create variable. You can create from here. You can go to variables pane and also you can create variable from here. So now let's create using this variables pane. So I will click on create variable. Now we need to type a name of that variable. So always make sure you give a meaningful name of any variable name so that it is easier to identify what that variable is for. So now suppose that I want to store a name. So I will just name it as name. Then I can create one more variable like address. So I will put address as a name. Now there is a variable type. So what kind of data we want to store in this variable? We need to select this variable type. So keep in mind UiPath support almost all .NET data types. So here you can see we have boolean, integer, string, object, system.data.data table, array, and if you need any other data type, you need to click on browse for types. So once you go there, you can see many references, and in that you can have many data types. So you can use whatever you want. So as name is a kind of a text variable, so I will take it as a string itself. Then we have a scope. So scope is something like where you want to use this variable in this workflow. So suppose that you have multiple scope. Okay, so let's take one sequence to understand what is a scope. This is one sequence and we can have many sequence inside this sequence. So suppose that I have created sequence 1 and here is sequence 2. Okay, and if I create a variable inside this sequence, so let's take one example, number, and we'll put int 32. So now you can see by default it took the sequence 2 because I had selected this sequence 2 and then only created this variable. So by default it took this scope. But when you click on sequence 1, this variable will be gone because sequence 1 does not have access to that particular variable. So now if you want to increase the scope, you have to click here and then you can select the scope. It's parent basically. So sequence 2 parent is sequence 1. So if you select this one, you can now access this variable here. But if you click here, you won't be able to see this variable again because the scope of that variable is sequence 1. So this is how a scope works. So be careful while creating a variable, because if you create like multiple variable with the same name in different scope, it can create a problem. So now as we created 3 variables, let's use it. So this assign activity. Now if I want to assign a value to name, so I will put here name and I can put any name, like let's keep hello world. Okay, now I want to print this value, so let's put it in box. So I can put this box here because this name variable is in main scope, means I can use it anywhere in this workflow. So now if I put message box here and I can put this variable name, then and if I run this process, then it should show the name whatever we had assigned here. So we had assigned hello world. So now it is showing here in the message box. Now let's assign one more value to address. So let's keep address as Delhi India. Okay. Now I want to show both values in one message box. So what we will do, we need to concatenate these two values. So for concatenation, you need to use plus operator and then you can put address. So now we have name, address, and here name plus address. It means both will be concatenated. Now the problem will be here is hello world and here it is Delhi, India. There is no space in between. So we might need to add some space here. Otherwise it will be added without a space, or let's say before adding a space. So I'm running this bot. Now you can see hello world and there is no space in between. So what we can do, we can add some space here. So for that we will take one double quote, we'll put one space, we'll close this double quote, and then we'll again use plus operator. It means we are concatenating three strings. One is name, one is a space, and one is address. Now once we run it, we can see there is a space now. We can also add any string here like hyphen or any other thing you can add. So now you can see hyphen is showing here, or also you can add a stage at this address. So now you can see hello world stage at Delhi, India. Okay, this is how variable works. Now we had one more variable number. Okay, so let's assign some value here as well. So I'm taking one assign activity and number. So let's put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Now you can see when we were adding text here, we added double quote because for a string we need to put it in double quote. But when it comes to number, we don't need a double quote here. So you can see I have not added any double quote. It's simple number, and this is also int 32 variable type. Now suppose that I want to show this number in this message box. So how to concatenate this? So we'll try to put number here. Now you will see there is an error. Why? Because it is saying that conversion from a string to double is not allowed. It is basically incompatible type, right? Because it's integer or it's in 32 data type and this is a string data type. So what we have to do, we need to convert this value to a string. So for that, you can use number dot to a string, and what it will do, it will convert this number to a string format and then it can be concatenated. So now see error has gone. We'll run it again. You can see numbers are showing now. So these are common variable and this is how we convert. You can learn for other data types as well, like boolean, data table, date time, and other variable type yourself from internet, or you will keep learning in this video series. So now we'll move to arguments. So now you can see we have a variable pen here and we also have a arguments pen. So what are arguments? So now suppose that you have two workflows. So let's go to project pen first. Okay, so now we have currently one main workflow. Okay, but now you have two workflows and you want to pass value from one workflow to another workflow. You will need to use arguments for that because variables can be accessed only from this workflow. It can't be accessed from another workflow. So to pass the value, you need to use arguments. So let's see an example here. So now what I'm doing is I will create a new sequence. So let's take a child sequence. And what I will do is I will take a message box activity here. I'm not going to add anything here. I will just take one argument. So like in message. So in arguments, you see 4 columns. One is name, direction, argument type, default value. So in name, we have given argument name where I have added in, and in direction you can see there are 4 options. One is in, out, property. So what is in? In means like you want to bring some value from another workflow to this workflow. Out means you want to send out some value from this workflow to the parent workflow, and in out means it's in both direction. So you can send also, you can receive also. So both will work. And property means kind of you don't want to use this argument, or maybe you had created it but you might use it in future. So you can just keep it property so that it will not be accessible in this workflow. So now let's use in direction because we want to bring some value from another workflow, and this is the argument type. So it is same like a variable type. So whatever the types you can use in variables, the same you can use in argument as well. And then default value. Okay, why I added in? So to identify this is argument or variable, or to distinguish between argument and variable, I added in, so that suppose that it is a big workflow, you will not be able to identify which is argument or which is variable. So that's the reason it's easy to identify argument if you add in out based on the direction. So let's add this argument here. So in message I have added in the message box. So now you can see I don't have anything here. When I run it, it will just show as a blank message box. Or if I add a default value, so let's put a default. So it will show default value. So now let's go to main again. in project, what I want to do now, I will invoke this workflow from here. So just drag and drop at this location. So what it did, it created one invoke workflow activity and it referenced this child workflow, and it is saying that there is one argument in message which we had created in child workflow. We need to pass some value here. So we need to click on refresh argument. So now we have to click on this expand button and that argument is showing now here. We need to now pass the value from this workflow. So let's pass name and address. So we'll put name plus address. Okay. I will now delete this message box. So now what is happening? We have name, we have address variable, and we have this invoke workflow activity. So when I run now, it should show name and address. Now you can see it is showing. How it is working? Because the value from this variable is going to this workflow using this argument. Now what if you want some value from this workflow to your main workflow? So let's take one example. We'll add one message box here. Okay, and I will put one argument out message, and we'll take one assign activity here. Out message, and we'll put some value ran successfully. Okay, so what's happening here? So now we have one message box which it will show the message which it is bringing from the parent workflow. Then you have one assign activity. It will assign one value to this out message argument. Okay, I saved it. Now we'll go to main workflow. We'll click on replace argument. Now you can see it is showing two items in dictionary. We have out message here. Okay, one thing we did, we have to change the direction. So we have to make it out to send out value from this workflow. We'll go here, we'll refresh again, and now you can see we have out message with out direction. We'll create a one variable here. So I have pressed Ctrl and K button to create a variable. So I will make it child message, and now we'll print that value child message. Okay, let's run it. So what it did, it passed this value name and address to the child workflow and it printed using this message box. Now when I press OK, it is printing this message box and it is bringing the text like ran successfully from child workflow. So this is how argument works. So this is all for today's session. Please let me know if you have any question. Drop that in comment section. I will try to answer your query, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.